James, thank you so much for joining us here at IMpower. Great to see you.
Good to see you too.
You must be excited to have ESG so high up the agenda at these sort of events now. It is really at the forefront of everyone's minds, and perhaps more so because of what we've seen over the last 2 years with the global pandemic. Tell me about how that feels for you in terms of where your journey began with ESG expertise.
Yeah, I mean, I started off life in banking, spent 15, 16 years in banking as a risk geek, leading teams at places like Barclays, moved into consulting, and then 2017, I was at Baringa. I was going through my own kind of climate anxiety, and at the same time, Mark Carney was standing up on conference platforms and starting to talk about the impacts on the financial system, and climate and risk started to come together, and there was clearly this opportunity to bring together my personal passions and a sense of wanting to have an impact on the world with my career. And the other light bulb that went on at the time was that all of the work that Baringa, this firm I'd recently joined, was doing for governments and energy companies on long-term transition strategy and energy policy, that was at the real heart of all of this. And if I could find a way of translating that expertise and 20 years worth of that experience from some of my colleagues at Baringa into what that meant for investors and for lenders, that would be a hugely useful and powerful thing. So it all really started there.
And climate is now at the top of the agenda, as we said. You're now developing a new partnership with BlackRock that sits very well in that space. Tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, well, one of the key things that it became clear that financial services firms were going to need was long-term climate scenario models, particularly models of transition. And that was central to a lot of the work that we've been doing for a long time with policymakers in governments and with energy strategists. And so those models, if we could extend them from what's happening to the overall energy system and to transition into what does that mean for companies and their securities, their bonds and their equities and their loans, then that was really the information that we would need to support our financial services clients. So we set about on quite an intense period of developing those over 2019-20. The Bank of England ran a climate scenario analysis in 2021, and we found ourselves supporting 10 of the 18 participants in that exercise because fundamentally the heritage we had meant that we built the most scalable, flexible, powerful model. But what was clear to us at the time was we were experts in transition and all the technologies required to transition, but we weren't technologists as such. And we needed a partner to help us to scale these analytics globally. At the same time, BlackRock were scouring the market to understand who's got the best model here. And so the two of us have formed a partnership to bring the modelling that we've developed into the Aladdin platform and make that available to investors globally.
What are you now seeing in terms of awareness of that, excitement around it? What are you hoping will happen next?
Awareness is quite high, and it really comes from two quite separate places. There's clearly a need for investors to understand the risks that they're exposed to, and to be able to quantify that in a consistent and robust fashion. There's also an appetite to be able to set net zero strategies, targets, and so you've got these two separate drivers of activity, both of which need to be modelled and supported in a consistent way. And so that's really what we're supporting here.
You really are seeing clients changing their approach now in terms of ESG. You think it's sort of becoming a truly integral part of businesses, not an overlay?
Absolutely. I mean, from a risk perspective, this is completely a commercial issue now. From a risk perspective, the potential for governments to enact policy that drives transition will drive asset prices, and you have to be able to anticipate that and manage your portfolio with that in mind. From a net zero perspective, if you're a board member, your seat on the board depends on your ability to manage your relationship with your shareholders, who are now demanding that you have a clearly articulated net zero strategy. So those two things are both commercial issues that you have to manage.
It sounds, James, like you're in the perfect position to offer your expertise now. Thank you so much for sharing some of those thoughts with us today. Great to have you at IMpower.
Thank you.